Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each of the episodes against each other. And today's episode is Grey's Anatomy, Season 4, Episode 7, Physical Attraction, Chemical Reaction. Episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happens in the episode. So, as always, we'll summarize the patients. First patient, child, swallows a marble. His parents promise to get him something for going to the hospital, which the initial marble doesn't really do much, and he asks his parents for a divorce. They, of course, are taken aback by this. He's sent home. He comes back later having swallowed 8 marbles. However, in fact, they are not marbles. They are actually magnets, and the magnets are trying to join together through his body, regardless of the flesh that is in between. And this, of course, then leads to him needing to get a major surgery. And after that surgery, the mom basically is like, well, me and my husband, we used to be happy, but now they haven't been happy for a while. And after her son went to such lengths to get them to divorce, she is thinking that they should be separate. Next, we have 2 minor patients. The first one is Jerry. He's had a procedure and now he cannot go to the washroom. Well, at least he cannot have a bowel movement, we should say. And he's a little bit upset about this, to the point where he is reminiscing about back in the past when he used to be able to have bowel movements, and some memorable ones that he regales Alex with, to the point that Alex basically runs to Bailey and says, like, I can't handle this anymore. Izzy is on Sloan's service. Her patient has a facelift. It's kind of rude to Izzy about, like how you're only getting uglier. You should enjoy your life while you're still pretty because you're not always going to be. And she can't remember the last time she had a relationship, and basically is also refusing to follow aftercare instructions. So those patients are then put in the same room in the hopes that they will basically annoy and abuse each other instead of the doctors. Ultimately, however, it ends up with them sharing one bed, which Izzy and Alex walk in on, which is a bit of a funny moment. And then I'd say the patients that this episode really revolved around was basically a mother, Teresa. A mother named Teresa comes in with her daughter that they just adopted a week ago, and she comes in a panic because, she fell down the stairs holding the baby. The baby was crying in the car, now it stopped crying, and she's very distraught. So the baby, of course, is taken to Shepherd to look at, make sure nothing terribly wrong has happened. And ultimately for the baby, it ends up just being like a minor bleed, and they decide to keep the baby for observation. Baby doesn't have a name yet because they had just adopted her a week ago and they were trying to get to know her. And unfortunately, well, basically, mother's instinct, adrenaline, Teresa manages to make it to the hospital because her worry for her baby is driving her there. Unfortunately, this adrenaline disguises her own injuries, which are actually catastrophic, and she ends up coding as soon as the baby's taken from her arms. And Han takes it over. She has one surgery where they fix, her heart in the one lung, but then the other lung springs a leak, and then her heart isn't strong enough, and ultimately she ends up dying on the table. While all this is happening, her husband is basically like, we adopted this baby a week ago. Teresa instant bonded. I haven't really bonded as much. I don't think I can do this alone without Teresa. Like, I can't do this. I'm not a bad person, but I just don't feel that, I can be there and whatnot. And then Meredith comes in and basically asks him what he knows about the baby. He lists 5 things, and she says there's 5 things that, that nobody else knows. And this, kind of gets him thinking about the fact that, like, maybe he didn't bond as instantly as Teresa, but he does clearly know the baby. He has been getting to know her, and maybe it wasn't as instant, but, he still knows her. But then when his wife dies, he does leave at first. But later he does come back, having remembered a sixth thing about, how she doesn't like her car seat unless she has a specific stuffed animal. And he ends up naming the baby and is now resolved to be a single father and gives the baby the name that his wife had wanted to name her before dying. So so that's all the patients. And then we have, of course, continuing Lexi Meredith drama. Obviously, Meredith's still resistant to Lexi. Lexi still wants to try to connect with Meredith. At first, Meredith is even having Alex try to stay away from Lexi because he brought her to the house. And so Meredith is like, Lexi needs to get her own friends, get her own, life, stay out of hers. Um, but when Meredith talks about the five things, Lexi gets inspired, comes to Meredith later, and lists five things about herself, like the fact that she doesn't like apples, plays trombone, is good at etch-a-sketching, and, various other things, talking with her hands, so on and so forth. Um, I feel like I'm forgetting one of them, but I can't remember it at the moment. Anyways, this then leads to Meredith at the very end of the episode when she's sitting in the bar with Alex, and Alex tells her that he picked her and has told Lexi he cannot be with her. She then tells Alex, basically, she lightens up, lets Alex be friends with Lexi, tells Alex to bring Lexi home because Lexi's passed out in the bar from drinking. When he takes her home, it is revealed that Thatcher has become an alcoholic since Susan's passing, and Lexi does not want Meredith to know. Derek and Richard have become friends. Of course, Derek let Richard move his trailer onto his land, and now Sloane basically is commenting on the fact that Derek's pretty much dating the chief. He's got Meredith for the intimacy side of things, and then like the actual relationship, partnership type side of things. He's helping Richard with the dry cleaning. They get together for dinners and movies. Um, they're having little squabbles over, the stain still being there after getting the dry cleaning and things like that. So basically those relationship things, and Sloane's making fun of Derek for it. However, when Richard and Derek kind of have a little bit of an argument over Sloane, that leads us into our next drama, which is basically in previous episodes, Torres and Bailey decided to work together with regards to Chief Resident. However, Torres has not been pulling her weight and has basically been leaving it all to Bailey. Bailey's been covering for her, doing her job, but then saying, oh yeah, Torres told me to say, do this, do that. Oh, Torres made that schedule that she actually made, so on and so forth. And through their little squabble, Richard realizes that actually Bailey's been picking up the slack, Bailey's been doing the job, so he fires Torres as chief resident, basically demoting her, and gives the job to Bailey instead so that she can both do the work and get the credit. And Bailey is so moved by this promotion, which should have gone to her anyways, that she ends up hugging Richard while crying. And then the last little bit of drama. Oh wait, no, there's two more pieces of drama. Next one, of course, Han continues to discriminate against Christina. Even when Christina is assigned to her service, she's refusing to teach her. She goes ahead and switches to Meredith. And, well, frankly speaking, she's working in a teaching hospital. It is part of her job to teach every student. And she is purposefully discriminating against one because of who she dated in her personal life, which, of course, again, has nothing to do with her professional life. So, this continuation of the discrimination is very dislikable. And then last but not least, we have Izzy and George trying to be intimate again now that he is divorced or separated, or I don't know what the official status is. I don't think they've gone through the whole court proceedings, but they're over, the marriage is over. And it is unfortunate, but they mistook drunk chemistry for sober chemistry, and throughout the entire episode, they are trying to get back that chemistry and ultimately end up failing. But that's, in a nutshell, what happened in this episode, which was actually quite a bit. So now that we've been reminded what happened, time to rank the episode first on the mostly objective ranking, followed by the personal ranking list. Mostly objective rank values, we have our single episode supporting character introductions. We have the patients. Marble Eater is Brian. Harriet is the one who gets the facelift. Jerry is constipated. And then, of course, like I said, the main storyline for the patients in this episode was Sean Brotherton, Teresa Brotherton, and then the baby does get named at the end of the episode, Keisha Brotherton, which is what Teresa wanted to name her. And they're 1 point each, which brings us to 6 points right off the bat. Then we have the multi-season supporting character development, which is Thatcher is revealed at the end of the episode to be a drunk. The multi-season main character development, which is Bailey's promotion to chief resident. We also have the multi-season main character development, which is Torres's demotion from chief resident. And then we have our negative messaging or behaviors. Again, Han is working at a teaching hospital, which means that in addition to being a surgeon, she is also a teacher, and it is part of her job to be a teacher, to teach the students, and that is all of the students. Purposefully discriminating against and refusing to teach one student is frankly disgusting behavior, and I don't forgive her for it, personally, but I take 2 points on the mostly objective ranking as well because it is part of her job. She is a teacher, a surgeon, yes, but a teacher at a teaching hospital. She is required to teach all of the students, and the fact that nobody is making her do so, even though it's part of her job, and are allowing her to discriminate against one of the students is, again, I think it's disgusting. Then, of course, we have Torres basically pushing all of her work onto Bailey without really caring about it. And it's feeling like it's been a pattern. Like from the moment she got the promotion over Bailey, she's been going to Bailey for help. Then Bailey agrees to help her, and now she's kind of taking advantage of that help by just letting Bailey do all the work, even while she still holds the title. However, Richard, again, by the end of this episode, realizes what's happening and gives Bailey the promotion that really should have always been hers. But yeah, the pushing her work onto Bailey wasn't great. So I took 2 points for that as well. And then we had the supporting relationship regression, which again is Izzy and George. Drunk chemistry does not equal sober chemistry, and that is what they find out in this episode when they completely fail to be intimate with any sort of success. So ultimately, with all of those points being calculated, it leaves us with 11, so it is still a 10 out of 10 episode. And that brings us to our list, where when more than one episode has the same score on the mostly objective ranking list, it is ranked in episode order, so we have a change is going to come in first, followed by physical attraction, chemical reaction, which is this episode, in second. Then we have third, kung fu fighting, haunt you every day, love/addiction, let the truth sting, and the heart of the matter in seventh. Personal ranking, I think I've already basically made my opinion clear. The flaw in this episode is Han. Oh, I just remembered something I hadn't mentioned in like any of the other points in time. Sloane thinks he has a crush on Han, but she shuts him down at the bar at the end of the episode, that it wasn't really her he liked, or that he only liked her because he knew she wasn't attracted to him. Now, I liked the adoption story. I think it was really close to being emotionally impactful. I like how the father had to kind of go through the growth while his wife was dying. This baby, it's not his biological baby. They just adopted her, but they hadn't really bonded yet. The baby didn't even have a name yet, and now he's like a single parent, which was not part of the plan, and he doesn't know what to do, and he considers briefly giving up the baby because he doesn't believe he can do it on his own, but then after some encouragement, he decides ultimately to keep the baby, names the baby what Therese would have wanted, and I felt like that was a really nice story and a nice moment. Even like Teresa at the beginning the fact that, she was able to, despite having catastrophic injuries of her own, prioritize her baby, bring the baby in, and herself also to the hospital by extension, but like just the fact that, you know, a mother is able to do that sort of thing where it's like you're catastrophically injured, but because your instinct as a mother to protect your baby is so strong that you're able to kind of ignore or not even realize your own injuries to get the baby the help that it needs. And as soon as the baby was taken care of, all the tension drained, and that's when her own injuries were revealed. And I don't know, I think mothers are amazing. So I thought showing an amazing mother was a really good thing. It is a pity that they chose to have the character ultimately not survive, um, which makes the ending a bit bittersweet, but that also has its own pros as well. I like the Lexi Meredith drama. I thought it was hilarious that Derek, like Sloane kept telling Derek that he's dating the chief and that their interactions and their friendship are very similar to the partnership side of a relationship. Um, Even like the Alex kind of getting between Lexi and Meredith and having to make a choice, making a choice only to have it like immediately turned around. There's, of course, the foreshadowing with Thatcher being revealed to now be an alcoholic. At the end of the episode, Izzy and George never was a fan of them, and obviously now we can see that. And wow, I couldn't speak there for a second, but it's obvious. It is obvious, I think, that they just were great as friends, but they just never were meant to be more than that. And even while they were, going around, I do think they love each other on an emotional level, like as a friend. So I do think their love is real in that sense, but I don't think they were ever meant to be romantic love partners. And so that part was a little bit like, eh. And now we're, of course, seeing the relationship already starting to regress with this lack of intimacy. Um, Bailey got the promotion she deserved, which I think is very important, and I did love to see that. Did not like Han. So basically, I felt that this episode had a lot more positives than negatives, but it was not without its flaws, and so I decided to give it a 9 out of 10, and I did like it best so far, which is why I put it in first place. Physical attraction, chemical reaction, a change is gonna come, haunt you every day, love/addiction, let the truth sting, kung fu fighting, and the heart of the matter is currently in last place for me. Which now brings us to the series ranking so far. And on the mostly objective ranking, we have season 1 in first, followed by season 2, then season 3 in third. Season 4 has a score of 45 out of a possible 150 so far. On the personal side, we basically have the exact opposite. Season 3 in first, followed by Season 2, then Season 1, and Season 4 so far has a score of 48 out of a possible 150. But with that, we have now rewatched and ranked Grey's Anatomy Season 4, Episode 7, Physical Attraction, Chemical Reaction. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.